So, new Deltarune chapters. It's Japanese.
そしてもちろん、ズンさんの東宝プロジェクトトーク。
Hi, my name is Sleepy Fox. You can call me Fox, but don't call me Sleepy. As of the recording of this video, Deltarune Chapter 5 will release in like a few days. And to hype us up, Toby Fox has graced us with a total of 15 whole seconds of game footage. Riveting. I've been thinking of this video long before that happened, like months ago. But I think that was important to address because of a certain clip. But we'll get there when we get there. Let me just put this gun on the countertop right here. If you read the title of this video correctly, then you know what this is going to be about. So, I guess I have some explaining to do. This video is about the Chapter 5 secret boss. But stay with me for a moment, okay? Okay. Just pretend you didn't read the title. You ready? Okay. To start off, let's talk about all the current Shadow Crystal bosses and lay out all the different motifs and patterns they have. I think it's fair to assume that the next one will follow in the patterns that the other ones left before them. For the purposes of today, the Knight does not count as a normal secret boss. She is a special case, mainly because if we're operating under the assumption that the Shadow Crystals are given by the Knight, most Shadow Crystals are given in Knight-created Dark Worlds, where the Knight had enough time to dig around. The only reason why the Knight is the Shadow Crystal boss in Chapter 3 is because she literally just got there. Killed Tenna, nabbed Undyne, left, and probably celebrated by playing Ultra Kill or something. Anyways, let's go through this with an internet-friendly, numbered list. Number 1, obviously, there's the whole they have going on. They all have different ways they comment on the idea of freedom in a world that doesn't have it. Like, Jevil copes with it, thinking that he's the only free person that knows the truth. Spamton desperately claws at the idea of freedom through any means necessary, and rejects the notion of divine destiny in favor of free will. Number 2, they're all strong as shit. Secret boss is gonna secret boss. They're not, like, hard as, like, Sans and Undertale, but they still pack a punch. They'll break my collarbone if I'm not careful enough. Oh! Number 3, they all reference Undertale. Well, not all of them, sorry Jevil. The soul-changing secret bosses specifically very directly tie back to previous Undertale characters in some way. Spamton had the Neo thing going on and turned you yellow, and Gerson was a role model to Undyne in Undertale, and he turns you green. Toby said in an interview that Deltarune would revisit and elaborate on certain aspects that Undertale didn't, and I'm pretty confident that this is what he is talking about. More subtly, both of them reflect Mettaton and Undyne in interesting ways in terms of their story and personality. Spamton was a star like Mettaton, but instead of transitioning into a body and lifestyle that made him happy, he lost all of it and became even worse. Undyne's undying strength and will to overcome death is reflected in how Gerson also was literally resurrected through his passion, albeit indirectly through his legacy as an author and the pressure that left on Alvin. I've heard some arguments that Jevil is supposed to reference Sans, but I'm personally not convinced. Sure, he's a nihilistic joker, but he's not blatantly referencing the Bone Man in the same way Gerson and Spamton are. I think the reason he doesn't overtly reference Undertale was because it was the first chapter, when Deltarune was trying to build its own identity. If Jevil was more of a Sans reference, 2018 would have treated Deltarune more like Undertale too. Well, more than they did anyway, but, you know, it wouldn't help. And lastly, the way that the soul-changing secret bosses foil the Lancer fan club. Well, foil is the wrong term. It's more like they imprint a lesson onto the Lancer fan club in a very specific way. Now, obviously, Gerson mentors Susie to be more defiant and write her own story. He inspires her to have hope crossed on her heart. And Spamton has a whole thing with Chris, trying desperately to become free by stealing their soul. And when he ends up becoming lifeless without his strings, he ends up reminding Chris that they're just a cage with human soul and parts. I don't think it's a coincidence that Spamton was obsessing over Chris's soul specifically. If we follow this pattern, that means the next secret boss will end up teaching Rouse a lesson, assumedly related to him being lonely and princely, I guess. I've seen some arguments that the next secret boss will mentor Rouse in a similar manner that Gerson motherfucking boomed it to Susie. But going off of this pattern, I think it's more likely that the next secret boss will end up making Rouse worse. I think they'll probably comment on Rouse's isolationist tendencies and unpack the whole Darkner, I'm not a person thing. So where does that leave us? What would a strong, nihilistic Undertale reference that deals with themes of isolation and loneliness look like as a secret boss? Oh, Jesus. Okay, I've held in long enough. The secret boss is obviously going to be related to Sans in some way, right? Or at least Skelebros related. There's only one Shadow Crystal boss left, according to Sham, and I doubt the Purple Soul will be next, because Muffet, on top of being a Kickstarter boss, is not in Hometown. I don't know, Glide was in the anniversary stream, so anything's possible, but I'm still confident on the Blue Soul in particular, because of how the next chapter is setting itself up. Which leads into... we have a pretty decent idea of where this chapter is going, I feel like. Considering we have the trailer and everything, and all the foreshadowing that Chapter 4 had, it's very hammered over the head, but let's go over all of this just in case. The prophecy panel suggests that Asgore will play a big role in the next chapter, if that wasn't obvious. Flower Man trapped in an asylum, it's safe to assume that Flower King will be our next destination. Especially with the whole cherry blossom aesthetic going on, it's pretty obvious. Hospital and Holiday House believers found dead in the water. I'm like 90% sure that he's going to be the main boss too. From the few snippets we're getting of Chapter 5, I'm going to assume he'd be the ruler of this kingdom, so presumably there's going to be a royal aesthetic to this as well. Maybe we'll get to see his iconic robes in more of a Japanese fashion. If anything, he's going to be the next person creating the Dark World. Asgore mentions that the flower shop is usually busy during the festival, which is going to be happening in the Chapter 5 Light World. So it's not unreasonable to assume that we'll have guest Lightners in the next chapter again. I'm a firm believer that Noel will make another appearance based on the weird route chart thing. Plus, he's following Susie and Chris in the Light World, so it's not too hard to connect the dots. Mayhaps other Lightners will join us in on the fun? Who's to say? This is usually evidence for Sans and or Papyrus showing up in the Dark World in Chapter 5, but this is the part that I disagree with. Now, obviously, he's going to have somewhat of a presence in the chapter. The Inferno of Jealousy. Gee, I wonder what Asgore is jealous of. Whether he's actually in the Dark World physically doesn't really matter for the sake of this theory. All that matters is that I don't think he's going to be the next secret boss. I personally think that it's a bit too early to delve into the Skelebros' Gaster shtick. We're still going off of the intended bounds of the prophecy if Gerson's dialogue has anything to say. At least, I think it's too early to tackle it directly. Now, indirectly, hell yeah, baby. Not only that, but I don't think this is a version of Sans who had the same outlook on free will as his Undertale counterpart. He's a lot happier and more carefree from what we can tell. He clearly knows more than he lets on, don't get me wrong. And maybe this Sans is just putting on that mask harder than Undertale's. But I think there's clear evidence that Sans Deltarune is a past version of Sans Undertale. Someone who didn't go through the events that made him so resigned in the first place. It's basically soft confirmation at this point. Go watch the Place Art Rain video, it explains it better than I will. But if not himself, then who will be the next secret boss? How would the game do that? How would you get a character that would be similar enough to Sans that it would impact all the jealousy that Asgore holds, hold Sans Undertale's views about freedom, and also simultaneously act as a reflection of Ralsei? You make them a Darkner.
Oh, big whoop. You prove the next secret boss is gonna be a Darkner.
Anyways, if we operate under this hypothesis, then we need to figure out what type of object our Darkner will be made of. From what we know, Dark Worlds reflect the memory and opinions held by the person who created it. Not only Dustners, but all Darkners. This is why the second Sanctuary was so fucked up. What's an object that we know in Flower King that Asgore associates Sans with? Why, it's the Jar of Pickles, baby! Now, Asgore seemingly still has a good relationship with Sans. He might be oblivious to his Soriel jitterbugging it in the background, or he might still be on good terms with him despite knowing that. I'm a personal fan of the latter because it seems more interesting. He has a dependency on the same man developing a relationship with his ex-wife. Asgore's a good man, I think. I don't think he'd outwardly or publicly show his jealousy, even if he feels that strongly towards it. But the fact is that he still wants Torio back. He makes that very apparent. He wants this family back to the way it was, so it would make sense that at least subconsciously he would view him as a threat of some kind. The Jar of Pickles represents Asgore's dependency on Sans, something he can project his feelings on whenever he creates the Dark World. That jealousy boiling underneath him has to go somewhere, I imagine. Going back to the patterns previous secret bosses discussed, let's go down the list. Number 1 references Undertale. I personally don't think that a Pickle secret boss would just be Sans as a pickle, and maybe it won't even just be Sans. I've neglected to mention Papyrus in this conversation, mostly because he doesn't fit with the whole jealousy narrative, and I doubt Asgore will even know he exists. But it's entirely possible we may get our first secret boss duo, or having multiple personalities, like the Winterer Sockswall, as an example. Regardless, The jar of pickles is no doubt tied to Sans. Number 2 is very strong. I think we've covered that. Themes of freedom. A darkener based on Sans, specifically Sans Undertale, would no doubt hold some of the same outlooks on choice and free will. That nothing matters and we should just go along with it anyway. We've yet to see that perspective from any of the other secret bosses. For it to be the exact same thing, I'm skeptical on, but maybe New Light could frame it in a different way. I think that it could be explored differently from how Undertale handled it, especially when it comes to number 4, foiling Rousey. Rousey and Sans are pretty similar in the fact that they know that their world is a predetermined outcome. Sans that everything will eventually get reset, and Rousey that the tragic ending of the prophecy is coming. The difference is that Rousey is trying to change the outcome, and Sans is complacent in his lack of free will. It's not entirely the same, but they're veiled in the same vague, gasterish cloud. On another note, having a weird darkener who looks like a lightener but isn't actually a lightener be the secret boss would be very fitting for Rousey, I think. For obvious reasons. Again, I think this secret boss should make Rousey worse, or at least would emphasize his loneliness, in a similar way that Chris had a relationship with Spampton and how that impacted them. And what better way to make the secret boss mirror Rousey by making them another woobified darkener version of an existing character? Maybe it's not exact, but it would be semi-obvious, I think. Which brings us back to the pickles. There could very well be another object that we don't know about that ends up being closer tied to Sans. Maybe something behind the double doors and on that giant conspiracy board thing. But the only thing that we can observe right now is the jar of pickles. So, where does that take us? Perhaps a pickle prince darkener that was whisked away from its former kingdom and now finds itself lost in a foreign land with no way to go home. After peering through a shadow crystal, it realizes that there truly is no way back home and ends up resigned to its fate. I'm writing fanfiction at this point, but you get it. That's a thesis. That's the takeaway. Pickles. Jar of pickles. Honestly, I'm pretty sure that if this theory is true, it's probably going to be a different object, but I'm going to bet on the pickles regardless. Huh? What? Oh, I left this gun on the counter. Guess I should put it... Owie. Okay, I had to add this part at the end because of the new trailer. Because there's new evidence for it now, and I've neglected to mention it at all. And that's the secret boss being a Flowey-like. The main strength of this argument is that Flowey is a mirror to Rousey, because they're both mirrors of Azrael. That's like mirrors squared. I don't really buy it, personally, because I don't see how a Flowey-like can connect to Sans that meaningfully, if it's going to use the blue soul, which is a pretty big if, but, you know. But going off the patterns that we previously established, I don't think that a Flowey-like is going to be the next secret boss. I do think that there will be a Flowey-like Darkener, but I personally think that they'll be a reflection of the humans in Undertale, since, you know, maybe the Golden Flower could be the secret boss, but again, I doubt it. And I think that just about wraps everything up I have to say. Hopefully this doesn't age too poorly in the coming days, because, you know, I don't have anything else right now. So the main takeaways of this are, Pickle. In conclusion, I'm concluding this. So, bye.